Hello, and welcome to the final episode of Inspire and Innovate. This is our fourth session of Women Leaders Month, and my name is Lazul Qureshi, and as always, I will serve as your moderator today for a thoughtful discussion. A bit of a background on me: I'm an innovation leader at a large health insurance company where I'm mandated to generate both incremental and around the bend blue sky innovations that align with our strategic imperatives and are aimed to delight and excite our members and consumers. Prior to my current role, I was heading strategy and innovation at CVS Health, where I was really focused on post-merger integration secondary to an acquisition of Aetna. I was focused on things like patient care transformation and reimagining the delivery of care. Prior to my post at CVS, I've been a lifetime consultant, both as a managing principal at a large tech consultancy firm within their healthcare solutions vertical, and I also ran a boutique tech consultancy group of my own. Earlier this year, all of our head offices decamped to work from home, secondary to executive orders and a looming upper respiratory illness that has challenged the world to think differently, to be agile, and to transform like never before. And so when we think of this session of Inspire and Innovate, focused on women leaders, we're really focused on non-traditional aspects of the workforce, non-traditional ways of doing things in a remote and distributed environment. And we'd love to sort of start a very thoughtful discussion with that underscoring train of thought. Recently in the news, Houston, Texas was hit with a catastrophic storm. Folks were without electricity and power for days, and some are still facing secondary effects of the storm. We also have an ongoing pandemic. We also have issues with getting vaccine distributions out, and folks are overwhelmed with trying to traverse their careers. Some have been furloughed, some have experienced loss of pay, and some have recently been let go. If we look at unemployment rates, they've grown to 14.7% from 5.7% prior to COVID. The facts show that 1 in 6 Americans have lost their jobs secondary to this virus. And we also know that unemployment is disproportionately affecting immigrants and minority communities. And so this series was born in partnership with ISGH to really think about how might we do something different? How might we promote bi-directional communication between women, leaders within our communities and folks that really need direction, support, and sometimes it's as simple as a conversation. And so with that, let's start the conversation with a quick intro to a world-class panel. And I'll just sort of go through the Brady Bunch type of list here where all the boxes are showing and begin with Sabine Abdul.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Sabine. So I am a consultant at Booz Allen Hamilton. I've been there for about 7 years now, and I have a master's in health administration and policies. And currently I work on a project that supports healthcare.gov, or rather known as Obamacare. So I've been working on that as a systems integrator for the last 5 years now. So alhamdulillah, happy to be here and excited with all of these wonderful women as well.
Thank you, Sabine. We're incredibly excited to have you here, especially with all of the transformations happening within healthcare and within the government. Aisha.
Assalamualaikum. Thank you so much for having us here today. I am an attorney and a social entrepreneur. I work at Robert Half Legal as a national director of recruitment. And we basically focus on providing legal and compliance staffing and consulting solutions to law firms and corporations. I'm also a founding member of the American Muslim Professionals of Dallas. We are a grassroots community service and networking organization. I am an active member of the DFW Muslim Muslim Bar Association, and most recently served as the National Communications Director for Pakistanis for Biden. I also serve on the board for the American Pakistani Public Affairs Committee. And I received my JD from SMU Dedman Law School, and I have a bachelor's in political science and international studies. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha. And Anissa.
Hey, assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Anissa. I am a management consultant with Accenture, based out of Philadelphia. I work in the healthcare space and specialize in customer engagement and marketing. I graduated from Princeton in 2018, focused on international public affairs there. And then outside of my work, I am on the board of the Breakthrough Miami Alumni Network, and I am also president of the Princeton 2018 alumni class. So thanks, excited to be here.
Thank you, Anissa. We're excited to have you. Anam.
Hi, assalamu alaikum, everyone. I guess I would summarize myself into like an entrepreneur at the intersection of media, content, and tech. I started as a journalist studying journalism in undergrad and working at the Boston Globe, then decided to pivot into more PR and marketing and ended up accidentally at a software company. Really loved the tech scene by working in Boston-based HubSpot and was there from when they were like a growth stage startup through their IPO. So it was a really cool 5-year journey of sort of seeing a startup grow up and go public into a publicly traded company. From there, went to business school at MIT, where I wanted to take everything I learned in tech and marketing and apply it back to my former life as a journalist. So doing that now with my startup called Below the Fold. It's a newsletter that helps you discover stories you aren't hearing anywhere else, and anyone can sign up at belowthefold.news. So if you need a way to hear what's happening every week, that's not about, well, no longer about Trump, but something that's not GameStop news or not Trump impeachment news or just something else from the main stories, come to us and we'll give you your weekly fix.
Yeah, I think we all need to get a bit away from the GameStop news, so that's refreshing. Shema.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Shema, and I am a senior beauty editor for Bustle Digital Group in New York City. My background is primarily editorial. I actually started at Marie Claire and worked at a few other magazines, including Vogue and Harper's Bazaar in research, and then went on to Allure, worked at a beauty company in Dubai, moved back, and now I am on the branded side, which is a little bit more marketing focused. Happy to be here and share the panel with all you lovely ladies.
Wonderful. And last but certainly not least, Lazul.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Lazul Qureshi. I am very excited to be here. I have potentially 2 different journeys in my life. As far as my corporate career, which was, managing large software projects. And then since then, once I left about 12 years ago, I started my entrepreneurship journey and I created a company which was education-based, very near and dear to my heart, because I was very much wanted to provide something that was critical thinking skills and project-based learning. And I did that and started my next startup, which is Braintree Technologies as of early last year. So I am what you can call a serial entrepreneur.
Wonderful. Thank you for the background, everyone. And I think this is a perfect segue. When I think of all of the panelists today, we have a lawyer, we have an MIT grad, ex-Boston Globe startup founder, we have a Princeton grad, rising star within the consulting community. We have folks focused on healthcare consulting with Booz Allen. It's just such a rich, diverse, and some might argue sort of like a non-traditional career paths each of you have pursued. And I'd love to kick off the session with speaking to the challenges you face and had to overcome in excelling your respective careers or excelling in your respective careers, knowing that, this isn't the typical engineer or doctor path. It's very unique. And Anam, just to kick it off, I might pick on you, and I'd love to sort of hear your perspective and guidance on folks that are pursuing something similar.
Sure, I'm happy to start. I think for me, as I went on in my career, things got easier, but it was sort of the very beginning of, I want to study something that's not the traditional career path you want to go into. And so when I first wanted to study journalism, I actually didn't tell my family right away. This was in high school. What I first did was we had like these healthcare related courses at my high school you could take for like if you wanted to one day be a doctor. So I took those at the same time that I took my journalism classes as the way to communicate with my parents, like, look how much better I'm doing in this versus this. And so don't you want me to like set up to be in a position where I can actually succeed versus like, I'm not doing well in this thing. And so it's just going to be a really long battle that I might not be able to achieve. And so that really helped create a conversation. My dad, I was lucky. My dad also loves the news. So he sat me down. He's like, so you want to be Anderson Cooper? And I was like, okay, let's go with that. And we use that to like, create some relatability and have a conversation. And so I think that really helps. And I've actually when I was in college, worked with a couple of different high school students. One, for example, who wanted to go into fashion design, and her parents were very strongly against it. And so she did. I was the regional director of this organization called MIST, Muslim Interscholastic Tournament. And so I was like, why don't you participate in both the business competition and the fashion design competition so that you can show her like, look, I actually have a business mindset. And if I study business, I can use that to go into fashion. And so I think there's a lot of different ways that we can help communicate what we want to do when you want to go into a non-traditional path. Like with my dad, it's all numbers. And so even when I switched from journalism to marketing, he was like, what's marketing? And I was like, well, it's this much $1,000 a year. And he was like, good. Like, he just needs to understand what's going on, right? And so you have to like, instead of like fighting them on what the career is, find things that are relatable. And so that I found has been really helpful, and it doesn't magically go away. Even when I was in grad school years later, after my parents were fully in, my dad was like, so now you're going to be an investment banker. And I was like, no, we haven't learned much, I see. So we had to like have that conversation again. So yeah, I think that's just, I'll let other people talk, but that's one thing that I think is really important, is just finding relatability and how you're describing this non-conventional thing you want to do so that it's understandable to other people.
Yeah, that's really interesting, to sort of sell your passion and turn neutrals or detractors into advocates by making it relatable and then having them become your supporters. What I really sort of netted out from what you were saying is there's this like skills that you're building within marketing and within like everything you're studying through education, and you can apply that to any domain, but the domain is actually what your passion is. And so, if I look at the group here, outside of sort of selling it to your families and having folks advocate for you to pursue this domain, how did you find out that that was your passion and what you wanted to pursue? Like, was there an exercise you went through? Did you just wake up one day and say, this is it? I'd love to hear anyone who wants to chime in your perspective there.
I'll go if you don't mind. So for me, my entrepreneurial journey really was, I think, by chance or by accident. And I typically call myself an accidental educator because I did not study to anything in the education field. I had a degree in computer science. That's what I did all my corporate career. I thought I would retire doing that. I really enjoyed what I was doing. However, life takes you for weird twists and turns. And I just, I had 3 small kids and I decided that I really wanted to be at home with them. However, when I decided to stay at home and really, become a full-time mom, I also realized that I needed some sort of an additional passion. I needed something else to be able to channel my energy towards. So I wanted to blend, what I had learned through my corporate career, and then be able to take what I wanted to get out for my family and to be able to blend the two together. And what better way to go into something that was business related to education. And that's kind of how I ended up. So it wasn't really by intention that I became an entrepreneur in the educational field. It was literally by where I was in my life, where, what my experiences had led me to, and a combination of that, and the timing was just right. So sometimes you just really have to be open to those opportunities and really be, open to what life brings you and how you can combine your passion I never would have imagined in my life that I would be in the education field, because I always thought that, it required a lot of patience to be in the education field. It required a different kind of a mindset, but it just so happened that where I was in my life and my experiences all blended together to provide this new passion for me.
Oh, that's wonderful. So it's almost being ready for opportunity when it presents. Because I might argue, I've gotten to know you now over the past several weeks, and you seem to be very patient, especially with me. So I appreciate that. So I guess, were there lessons you learned in pivoting from one domain to the next? Were there, how I can imagine it being sort of tremulous and having some fear, like imposter syndrome coming up, or how can I move from, X career to Y and seem like I'm an expert here? What are the exercises the team here goes through when you think about making that extreme of a pivot to the left or the right?
I'm talking about imposter syndrome. I think that's something that all entrepreneurs fight with at some point or another. Even now that I'm doing, I'm in the thick of my third company, I still feel sometimes that, what I'm selling or what I'm doing, is that really something that I know what I'm doing? So I have to fight that all the time, just like any other entrepreneur. However, you have to really trust your judgment, and you really have to trust that, the reason that you're here and you're working, 24/7, you have something to offer. And that's what really has been keeping me going and has been allowing me to actually be open to learning. So one of the other things is that, again, as a serial entrepreneur, you really have to be open to the education every single day. And you really have to be open to learning and understanding and keeping your eyes and ears open to new opportunities and how that can kind of be brought into your own fold. And I think that's like the most important lesson that I have learned, is that the learning never stops. The pivoting doesn't stop. And you have to be really open to those opportunities.
Yes, really well said. I imagine folks that have faced vocational challenges amidst the pandemic, some who still may be without work, some whose industry got disrupted, like oil and gas, and they're trying to figure out, how do I find the next thing? And these examples are like incredibly relevant, right? Like, I always think, take a deep breath, look at it like an opportunity, and really figure out where you want to find, where you can make the most impact. And I'm sort of impact obsessed. Anam, it seems like you're the same way. Anissa, I've gotten to know you over the past several years. You're the same way. Is there sort of like, was that sort of a variable that you indexed towards while making these career changes or pivots or designs, like passion as a proxy for impact type of thing?
Sure, I can start. I don't know if I ever thought of it as impact when I was younger, but I think as I've gone through my career, it's become more and more important. Earlier, you had asked too, like, how did you even find your passion? For me, like, I watched the movie 13 Going on 30 when I was 17, and I was like, she looks so cool. I want to be doing something like that. And like, that's literally what started me out. I was like, what's a magazine editor? Like, what's writing as a job? Like, I just got really, really curious. And so I think initially it was just this kind of speaking to what Ghazal was saying, just this passion for learning, because there's so much to learn. And I actually think it's kind of insane that at the age of 17 or 18, we were supposed to decide what we want to do for the rest of your life, because I would never say what I'm doing right now. And so I think an openness and a willingness to learn and just explore everything. When I was in college, I remember people thought I was weird I think it's more normal now. People thought I was weird my freshman year because I wanted to have an internship every semester and every summer. But it's because I was like, well, when else do I have a chance to just try completely random things and find out what I actually like doing? Because in my case, I started off studying audio journalism and being like a radio broadcaster. And after an internship in that, I was like, you know what? I don't really like listening to my voice. I don't think I could do this every day. And so through every internship and experience, you kind of learn. And so for me, now that I've learned a lot of things, I'm like, okay, I know what I'm the best at and I know where I can drive impact, and that drives my passion, because now my impact is my passion. But in the beginning, it was more just I need to be willing to learn as many things as I can to figure out what that is. 'Cause I think it's hard to point to something and be like passionate about that, and that's where my impact's going to be. But you can sort of experiment and try things to figure it out as you go, at least in my case.
Yeah, I would agree with kind of like the adding to it and like how it could change. So my story is that when I was in college, I was doing my senior thesis on civil society in Tunisia after the revolution. And first it just like started like normally, like I was doing the book like research. I went to Tunisia. I got the opportunity to actually interview these people. And then all of a sudden I found that like I was bothering all of my friends because I couldn't stop talking about this, like this was the only thing that I wanted to talk to people about. And I was like, okay, well, I guess that's what passion is, right? Like you find something that you're really excited about and you want to think about all the time. I think part of that is also like figuring out, okay, so this is an area, and then you want to get more specific, right? And find out what your niche is in this general thing, right? I'm not going to own all of civil society in Tunisia or democracy, or I'm not going to be able to make an impact like that big, but where do you want to contribute? So part of the reason I ended up in consulting was I was realizing that there's a space here that I want to learn more about, which is like business and the economic impact on society, and democracy as like a proxy for that. And I didn't know anything about it, right? I had studied all of this other stuff and I was like, okay, I'm going to go into this consulting job looking to learn. So again, like this is a recurring theme, right? Looking at all of your opportunities as like educational learning opportunities. And I think then just like kind of add that has developed since then, right? So that was 4 or 5 years ago. And then there are things like people change in their lives, right? You grow and you learn more. And I think both like in my career experiences and then my life experiences, I think like the pandemic was for me, as it is for many people, it was really like impactful. And it made me realize that something that I want to work in within that like larger space in the Middle East and North Africa region is I want to focus on health, right? Like it has such an impact on all of our lives. Literally, it like upturned everything. And so just kind of realizing that and being okay with pivoting, right? You don't have to be the same person you wanted to be when you were in like even a week ago, but definitely not when you were 17. So I think that's the thing, is like finding out what you want to talk about all the time, looking into what specifically you want to do there, looking for educational opportunities, and then being open to kind of changing your mind.
Yeah, and if I can just add on to that, I think it's passion is really important, but I think another key probably similarity between all of the women on this panel and Ozera, you as well, is that we are that first generation that came of children, right? And we've seen our parents work really, really hard. And so I think that is also an example that has been set for us, is to work really, really hard towards something. So it's not just I think passion is important. Doing something that you love is really important, but also whatever you do, work really, really hard towards it and at it, and you'll find something that you like about it, right? Because I think a part of that first generation kind of cloud that follows you is that imposter syndrome. Is, should I be here? Should I be doing this? I think even right now, I'm like, wow, these are such amazing women on this panel. What am I doing here? And so I think a part of you always feels a little bit like, do I belong? But I think that extra working hard aspect of it can help you get further and get to where you need to be, or even where you should be, right? If you start to feel a little lax about some of the day-to-day that you work on, or whatever your 9-to-5 job is, you probably are going to start to lose that drive and that passion to get you to where you need to be. So I think a lot of it also has to do with that work hard aspect that we all probably have under our skin.
Yeah, I love that. And there's so many gems that came out of this just first discussion point. I got, find your job, your vocation, what you're looking to do, and use a litmus that you can't stop talking about it. I really like that a lot. Be open to opportunities when they come, and look at new opportunities as training and paid learning, which is amazing. And Sabine, I'll underscore what you said is whatever you do, work ferociously and be sort of perpetually tenacious in those efforts. When I think of being perpetually tenacious, when I think of working hard, and this may be the Shark Tank-ism of what's happened in life, my mind goes to entrepreneurs. It goes to startup founders. And I personally have such a healthy envy for people that start something from scratch, right? I'm an industry expert and a mentor at the Harvard Innovation Lab, at the Brown Center for Entrepreneurship. And I see these startups and I have this healthy envy, like, wow, this is amazing, right? You're taking a risk and you're starting something brand new. And we have entrepreneurs on this panel. And I'd love to sort of poke at the entrepreneurs here and ask if you could sort of give guidance in 3 ways, right? Like, what is the mindset in becoming an entrepreneur, right? What are the skill sets in becoming an entrepreneur that one should develop? And then maybe we end with, what are the tangible steps to take something from an idea to a pilot to a product? Again, mindset in becoming an entrepreneur, skill set in becoming an entrepreneur, and then the tangible steps.
One of the things that I just wanted to add is that even in the realm of entrepreneurship, I have extensive experience in working with different personalities, because in my other company, we actually ended up creating a franchise company. So we were dealing with entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs that were looking to explore coming into our fold as a franchisee. And one of the things that really stood out to me was there are 2 types of entrepreneurs. So I think that is one thing that we have to really understand first, that there are 2 different distinct type of entrepreneurs. One, somebody that has an idea that's never been done before. They want to try something different. They have their own views on how they would like to have that journey. And then there's what I would call, and not necessarily one is better than the other, but a safer entrepreneurship journey, where somebody's looking to either purchase a business that's already running, or to go into a program such as a franchise program where things are already set in place, the processes are there, and you're basically following that lead. Yet you're an entrepreneur because you're running the show. So I think that's one thing that we really have to understand is, if we are going to be going into an entrepreneurship journey, what kind of entrepreneurship am I? Am I the one that really wants to take that full risk and start from scratch and see if it works, doesn't work, whatnot, or kind of follow a program or a safer route? So I think that's really something that everybody has to think about. And then the other thing, as far as how to get started, is my experience has I'm going to speak from my experience. So my experience has been, where I, call me crazy, but I don't like to follow the lead. I like to kind of want to carve out my own path. And I always feel like if I'm going down a path, I have the resources or the understanding on how to actually put it together better. So I'm a different kind of an entrepreneur. I'm the first kind that does not want to follow the lead. So for me, the advice is easier for me to give to people who actually have ideas out of, something that hasn't been done before. So my advice would be, put pen to paper, think through your idea, figure out what is the one problem that you're trying to solve. You can't solve the whole, the entire ecosystem. So pinpoint that one problem that you're trying to solve. Then go to work finding out, is that problem really a problem in your head, or is that a widespread problem? And then second of all, if it hasn't been solved yet, why hasn't it been solved? Is it because there's nobody willing to pay for that? It's not enough of a pain point? So I think those are some of the things that are very, very important when you're trying to start on that entrepreneurship journey, is to make sure that you're going after something that is a relatively large problem that you're going to solve by actually embarking on this path. So that's my advice for wannabe entrepreneurs.
And I can follow up to that. I totally agree with everything Ghazal just said. I think that in addition to kind of being able to visualize what it is that you're looking to achieve, a lot of times small business owners or entrepreneurs, they want to accomplish the world, and they don't have that vision or that focus on exactly what it is that they're trying to solve. So as an attorney, I often find myself saying, no, this is not the scope of your business. This is not what you're trying to achieve. And you'd be surprised as to how many problems just a simple no can solve, because you need to have that focused vision and the commitment to what it is, that you're trying to achieve. And so that would be one thing, is that knowing, okay, what is the scope of my business, and how can I achieve this, with the resources that I have available.
Sorry.
No, Adam, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to jump in as another entrepreneur on the panel. So I think the introduction that I gave at the beginning is actually really helpful to understanding my experience, because I didn't go right into entrepreneurship. I had jobs, I got experience in a lot of different companies, and I credit those experiences with being able to be an entrepreneur today. Because when I was at the companies, at a growth stage company at least, we had entrepreneurs coming and giving talks. I got to learn, and I got to be an entrepreneur within a company where we had a new business line that we wanted to go into, or a new product line that we wanted to deliver. And that was a way to actually get like a tangible sense of what is it like to grow a business, grow something, but just doing it internally at a company first, where you don't have to worry about fundraising, which is the least favorite part of mine. But it was a great experience to actually learn what I care about. So by the time I was an entrepreneur, everything I do today, I've seen it somewhere, I've done it somewhere, and I think that's actually really helpful. But I think the most important part in terms of tangible is making sure you have not just a support system, but a financial plan in place for how you're going to get yourself through this. Because it's really like, even Uzair was saying, like, it sounds so cool, and it's like this dreamy aspirational thing. But when you're actually in it, when you talk to me and a lot of my founder friends, especially female founders, all of our chats are about like, how do we just get through the next day? Because it's an exhausting position to be in, where you're like, I've taken the risk of having no security. I have no boss giving me feedback anymore, which I actually do think it's really helpful to have a boss for at least some part of your career. Like, everyone can grow and get feedback. And I value the lessons I learned at that time to be able to be my own boss now. And because I had a career previously in writing and in marketing, anytime we had like a dip, I could do my own freelance work, and I still do freelance work constantly to ensure that my financial position is okay, that I'm able to continue moving on. And if there's a way that if I ever need to bootstrap, like in the COVID year, where all of a sudden tons of investors pulled out, we had to lay off some people, we had to downsize our team, and I had to find other ways to bring in money to continue going on this journey. And so I think it's also important to sort of get out of the aspirational side of like, I want to be my own boss and I'm going to do my own thing, and think about, okay, what does it actually look like to get there? Are you like financially set up? In my case, I had to couch surf for 6 months before I could actually get to positions where I could get an apartment. And so really think through all these little details. And I'm not saying any of this to deter people. I think entrepreneurship is great. But I think for me, having a job first, being able to learn from an environment, I had like a stint at different startups that were doing things terribly wrong. So that was also great to learn from, like, okay, I don't want to do things this way. And then have actual experiences to be able to be like, all right, I need to do a freelance project tomorrow to get me through this next month. So really think about like, what is that lifestyle you want to create, and what do you tangibly need to do to get there?
Yeah, that's really good advice. I think, Anam, what you framed out really well is you've gained experiences that led you to that you're pulling on even till today. And I think it's so valuable. So, wherever you are in life, nothing that you're doing is throwaway. It's all perception at that point, right? Like, I coach a 6th grade basketball team, and I take lessons of leadership from those 6th graders into my work. As simple as that. Ghazal, you framed out something really well, is, when you're starting a new venture and figuring out who you want to be, which precedes what you want to do and what you want to have, is the B, is define if you want to be the type of entrepreneur that latches on to like an existing business, is more incremental, or if you have a net new, innovative, brand new thing you want to carve out. And both, I think, are really great in their own rights. And I think there's personality types that might do better in one or the other. And Aisha, I really liked how you said, sometimes you have to limit yourself. I don't really say no, I say yes and. And so the whole yes and of sort of really distilling down your idea into an MVP of something that you can really make operationalize, and make tangible. What I wanted to sort of hone in on here for a second, and Ghazal, you really sort of nailed this on the head, was when you're starting something new as an entrepreneur, start with the problem and fall in love with the problem and do things like primary and secondary research. Maybe you gain consumer insights through running a survey with friends and family to understand if this problem is even worth solving from a desirability, feasibility, and viability perspective. But, Anam, I was a little confused, and I just want to poke at this. You mentioned don't be aspirational or limit your aspirations in the beginning in terms of pursuing entrepreneurship. Are you saying limit your aspirations in terms of the problem you're solving, or in terms of the lifestyle you think that you'll generate from being an entrepreneur?
I don't remember exactly what I said around that, but I think what I was trying to get at is just don't limit your aspirations. Obviously, be passionate, have a vision for the future that you want, but make sure that vision includes the practical stuff as well as the dreamer stuff, because you need to make sure that you're set up to succeed through that. Because a lot of my founder time is like personal mental wellness, like making sure I'm getting through every day. And it's really easy to think about entrepreneurship as this like dream job to be in without thinking about, okay, what are the financial implications? What are my wellness implications? What's the lifestyle that I'm going to choose, right? Like a simple example, one of my founder friends, she's incredible and she's been doing an amazing job. But early on, before they hit their seed round, she'd go out to dinner with a bunch of her MBA friends and she'd be the one ordering an appetizer while everyone's ordering multiple things, right? And that's fine, but that takes tolls on your mental well-being over time when you're constantly doing something different. And so just dream, be a dreamer, but make sure you're looking at all the practical things that you need to be able to go along that journey.
Yeah, very well said. The pragmatism around the financial implications of letting go of a sort of a safe career path into entrepreneurship, I think, is important. What I'm envisioning in my head is like 3 rows and 4 columns. And let's say those rows are like desirability, feasibility, and viability. And the first column is sort of like exploration. So we spoke about exploration, fall in love with a problem, really dig through a market opportunity assessment, see if you're solving for something that's relevant. And then let's say people that have joined this call, they've done the exploration. They say, I have this problem. I really think that it needs to be solved. But now I need to move from the leftmost column of exploration to the next column. Let's just call it like incubation, right? And I need to test this thing out and see if I need to launch something, right? Before I get to a pilot or before I get to scaling something. What's the step from the problem identification, the market opportunity assessment, the lean canvas build to actually taking it to something you're incubating?
Yeah, I'm sure Ghazal has a lot on this too, so I'll let her chime in a second. But for me, in terms of a tech business, the very first thing we did and what we were taught at MIT was to not build it. And so that's like something it's really hard to resist. You want to go build it. You're like, no, I have this great idea and I want to put it out into the world. But what I did instead, and I'm not a technical founder, that's my co-founder, but I literally built our entire product on a piece of paper with black Sharpie. And I just like created little index cards and all the different features. And then I went to pre-pandemic to coffee shops and I just asked people, hey, like, I'd love for you to test out this thing that I'm doing. And I just took the paper and I moved features in and out. And with the absence of colors, with the absence of like all the emotional stuff, all you're seeing is black and white. You're truly just getting their reaction to the pure like what does this thing do? Because as soon as you introduce color and like how it looks, people start giving you UI feedback. They start giving you feedback on how it feels to them. And that's not what you're going for. You're just going for, will you use this thing? Is it solving a problem? And so we call that black and white paper prototyping at MIT. And so we do paper prototyping a lot to just keep people from building right away and just actually being like, is this valuable? Because if this piece of paper version of it isn't valuable, then the magically beautiful version of it is not going to be valuable. It's just going to be attractive to the eye. And so that's one tangible thing that we're taught. I also encourage checking out the book Disciplined Entrepreneurship, which is by one of the MIT professors. And I think it's really helpful in that it just lays out a map of like, here are the first 5 steps you should, I think it's more than that, but here are the first steps you should take to start a business. You definitely don't need it throughout your entire startup journey. But if you're just like, I don't know what I should do to start, it helps lay out some tangible steps you can take to get going.
And I'll add to what Anam said. When I launched this company, believe it or not, it was literally like 2 weeks. Officially launch date was 2 weeks before schools shut down for COVID. And here we are, educational software technology platform that was being built to really go after the school districts, the teachers, administrators. So can you just imagine, we literally were standing there going, what do we do? Where do we turn? How do we go about it? And we hadn't started building the MVP thing, thankfully. But we had landed a client that was a significant client, which was Whataburger Corporation. And the whole idea was that we were going to be able to provide Whataburger branded STEM learning to classrooms. And now the schools have shut down. We have nothing to do, nothing to deliver. So we quickly pivoted, and without letting our clients or our customers know, what was really happening behind the scenes, we were putting integrations with different platforms and piecing it all together in the back end. We hadn't built anything of our own yet. And yet we were putting out content, and we were providing services, literally kind of like that paper and pen model that Anam was just talking about, but a little bit of technology behind it, using some integrations and zaps to make data move. And yet we didn't have a product, but we were able to launch and be able to gauge what the reaction of the customers were, and be able to then massage and build the product according to what the customers were really looking for. So I think some of those things are really, really important, that don't just jump in and think you have the most beautiful solution in mind. Because even though you have gone through focus groups and you have gone through different things, until you put something in production, you really won't be able to gauge what the actual user reaction is to your product. So I think doing the most minimal amount of work, using spreadsheets to gather data. I mean, Google has so many great tools that you can use. We use Google Forms, and people wouldn't even realize that it was a Google form that we were using to collect the data. And then yet we were integrating it on the back end using Zapier and tools like that to be able to have that continuous workflow without having an actual software product launched. And that probably helped save us a lot of time and a lot of money towards the end.
I think that's great advice, not just for people tuned into this, but I think large enterprises can learn a lot from both Anam, you and Ghazal, and your advice here. I think, a lot of times folks over-engineer in the beginning, and they fall into the traps of what I term as innovation theater, where it's, oh no, I have to create the most beautiful thing that'll wow people, this high fidelity, clickable prototype. And it's almost a time sink, and it's really just theater. It's not chasing after what the consumer wants. It's not learning from, as you put it, a black and white prototype on them to really learn like what's going to move the needle. And it's always the consumer that does that. Another aspect of entrepreneurship that's sort of, and I think vocations across the board and sort of the non-traditional path, is having confidence and talking yourself up or building your narrative in a way that advocates for yourself. I mean, there's this line between cocky and confident. There's this, am I good enough? And I feel like, women disproportionately face this type of thing with men sort of mansplaining or shutting down ideas from women. And so like, all of you are incredibly confident, incredibly successful. Could you sort of highlight how you've built your narrative, how you talk yourself up, and what advice you might give to somebody else that's sort of building out that storyline of their own?
Sure, I can start here. So as a social entrepreneur, our company flipped a struggling restaurant business, actually. We increased its sales by 300% by building a narrative. And the narrative that we highlighted was the empowerment of South Asian women in our community, actually. So at least here in the Dallas halal restaurant market, the restaurant industry has basically cutthroat competition. And for a lack of better terms, it is dominated by halal kings and barbecue boys. So when Gulabo's Brunch and Barbecue showed up to challenge the standards of the family dining experience, our competition took note. And they saw how we sparked the public's curiosity while simultaneously filling a void in the community. So, it's that confidence, that building that narrative. I mean, I saw girl dads dress up their daughters to come have brunch together at a Pakistani restaurant. And, we received unprecedented positive feedback and appreciation from the community. And I do believe that this was a direct result of having confidence in our narrative and building it through a relatable character of Gulabo's that spoke to the invisibility of women in our third spaces. So in our own way, we were able to break glass ceilings in this space while helping introduce a struggling business to the community.
That's amazing. All of a sudden, I've become so hungry. Shema, I'm so sorry to cut you off, please.
No, it's okay. I feel like I could really relate to this this topic because I went to full-time school in Islamic school in Chicago, and I feel like there was this sense of we have to always be humble to a point where we don't talk about ourselves and we don't show off and we don't, so I wasn't used to that at all. And I go into New York as the only Muslim girl at a magazine, and I'm just like, how do I even stand out here? Well, actually, I did stand out at the time. I was wearing hijab, so there was no everyone knew who I was, but in terms of like feeling like I was confident and knew what I was doing when I didn't really have anyone to show me the ropes. I think one thing I realized from I think interviewing people is a skill, right? So I was painfully shy. I still feel like a part of me is a little shy. No pun intended. My nickname is Shy. But I think I had to go out there in red carpets and interview these celebrities. And that was like something that was not in my, in my wheelhouse of skills. I thought, of course, I actually graduated in journalism, so I knew how to interview people, but actually feeling confident about it. And the way I kind of approached it was like, the more I started doing it, I'm like, these are just people. They're just as, they're ready to have a conversation as much as you. And it's all a perception, right? Like you start to think about people's perceptions of you and how, you build up, you kind of have a little bit of control over that, right? So it doesn't mean that you're an imposter. It's just that you have to show that confidence in yourself first for people to perceive that part. So I also realized working with a lot of influencers in my line of work, I find a lot of times that people with a lot of followings that you would think are a certain way in terms of even the quality of their work and professionalism, we find with micro influencers, actually, they're producing a lot higher quality of work and just in our experience. And I think that there's that hunger there. And just because they don't have that perception of like being at the top, you would think that, maybe they're not going to produce as well as content, but we've just found so much success in that. And in those little I guess lessons, I'm seeing that there is this disconnect between perception and maybe what you think about yourself, and the onus is on you to try to sort of exude that more and be accepted in, especially as a woman. I feel like a lot of times it sucks, but like you have to, there is this, you see a difference in the way people talk to you, and it really starts from you. So I know I kind of covered a lot of things, but I feel like that is like really relevant to like all of us here.
That's right. It's really well said.
Yeah, I was. If I can add something, I just want to add a little anecdote here. So growing up, I remember, you're going to people's houses and people are, they see parties and things like that, and somebody would say, "Hey, to your parents, oh my goodness, your child is so incredible, or they did this so well. We're so, that's so exciting." And parents, I just remember to this day, every single time going, "My daughter, you should see them at home. You should see what they do. This is only because of this." I mean, we grew up as a society being very humble and being, not really bringing attention to the accomplishments of our kids. And I did not realize how much that affected me. And when I actually ended up working for larger corporations, I knew that I wasn't speaking up. I wasn't saying, "Hey, look, I did this. I was able to help come up with these processes. I was able to help save this much money to the company, or I was able to help build these projects." And I felt like people were taking advantage of that. And there were others that were piggyback off of my hard work and being able to showcase that as something that they accomplished. And it took a long time for me to get over that and to be able to speak up and not like worry about that I'm going to, rock the boat or whatnot. And I feel like that was a really important lesson, but I learned it so late in life. And I wish I had learned that a lot sooner. So I think as a society and as a culture, we really need to be mindful of that and really help our younger generations understand that, you're not trying to be a show off, but really do stand up and be proud of who you are. And whatever little steps that you have taken, be really, be able to be confidently say, "Look, I did this." So I think I kind of took it a little too far with my own kids. And I really am so proud of any little accomplishments that my kids have done that I think people are kind of tired of hearing about it. But I'm really excited and I really boost up my kids' egos. In fact, to a point where my daughter, who's in college now, is saying, "Mom, you made me feel like I was the best in the world. And now that I'm out in the world, I realize that there are people that are better than me. But you always made me feel like I was the best of the best." And my thing to her was, "Look, by doing so, you were so confident. You aced all your college interviews. You got the best of the scholarships. You were able to get to where you wanted to be. And now you're standing out there and being able to confidently say that, look, this is the type of person I am." So I think as a society overall, we really need to be mindful of that and really help boost the egos of our kids.
I love that, Ghazal. And, in one of the last sessions, I brought up an anecdote as well, and I'll just skim through it to make a connection to what you've just stated here in building up confidence. And I think that's what everyone here has said so far, is the first step is believe in yourself and over-index on confidence. As I mentioned, I coach a 6th grade basketball team. There was a kid called Tyler. I mean, this is an underprivileged neighborhood. They don't have the family structure present, and they really have a difficult life as I've seen it. And Tyler, when he was on my team, I saw him and I immediately thought, this is my ace in the hole. Gosh, this kid is so athletic. He's like, LeBron James in the making. And we started practice and Tyler never asked for the ball. His head was always down. You can read how unconfident he was in his body language. And a lot of the other teammates had a problem as well, where they wouldn't call for the ball, or nobody ever wanted to shoot, they wanted to pass because they were scared if I missed, then what happens? And so I remember this one practice, I said, all right, everyone, all we're going to do, and I'm going to be passing the ball, is everyone's going to scream ball. And that means I'm calling for it. And then I was screaming, be confident. Probably like if someone heard me or was watching me, they'd be like, this guy's kind of crazy. But it was important, I think, to get that message across. And then that season ended with Tyler being the MVP of the whole league. Although we lost every game, Tyler did really well. So I think it begins with that. So confidence. And then how about the storyline you curate after you've become confident? How do you sort of build that and sculpt it? Is it like, do you hire a career coach? Do you, yeah, I'll pause there.
I guess I'll chime. Oh, go ahead, Anissa. You can go. Oh, okay. So I think one of the things that it's like what is the next step. So I remember I was sitting in a conference room, and I was leading one of the projects, but I felt like, oh, maybe I should sit in the back, just as a servant leadership type of thing. So I sat in the back row, and somebody walked in, and he turned to one of his friends and said, "Oh, okay, I guess it's just us and the big boys table today." And they both sat down at the table. And I remember I like turned to the lady next to me, and I like looked at her, and I was like, not today. So we both like moved up our chairs, and we sat at the big boys table that day. And I think one of the biggest moments that was that if she wasn't there, I probably wouldn't have been confident enough to say, okay, we're both going to go sit at the big boys table, because I think a part of what drives your confidence and your success is that circle around you, right? If you have good people around you, and the example, like Ozair, you said you built up confidence for other people, I think it's really important to have a really good mentorship circle around you, and you can attract that mentorship circle if you exude that level of confidence. If you can say, oh, looking back at this situation, I was able to do this, and this thing that was good, then I'm sure other people will look at that and say, oh, yes, that person was able to perhaps kind of give me my return on investment, right? I invest time in them, they're going to give me back $20 in the 5 minutes of time that I gave them. So I think it's really important to have that mentorship circle around you that can help build you up and help you get to where you need to go. But I think it's just as important is once you have the opportunity to say, okay, I can do this, you've built up your confidence, you are able to succeed, is look back and do like a self-retrospective, right? Look back and see, okay, I know I did these things really well, but what is the thing that I can do next time that will make me even better, right? And I think that's really important, is that self-reflection of what could happen that makes me that improves my skill set, right? Because nobody's perfect. We're all going to be sitting at a bar that we just have to learn to kind of raise ourselves, right? No one's going to raise it for you. No one's going to be confident for you. You have to learn to do that for yourself, but you have to surround yourself with the people that will help you through that.
And Anissa, you were saying?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. So two things. I think one thing that's really important to me is that imposter syndrome is not tied to success, right? Like you can be the most successful person and still feel like an imposter. And so I think that's what's really important, is that you have to like actively recognize when you're feeling that way and then start taking the steps to kind of address it. And I think what you were saying about mentorship is so important. I think one of the most interesting things I learned this past year is that men and women receive different types of feedback. Managers, even like a very well-meaning, wanting to support you, will give better feedback to women that doesn't like necessarily correlate to like quantitative measures of performance. So they'll tell women like, oh, you're such a good team player, or oh, you like do all these community buildings, but they're not really going to help you grow. And so, and well-intentioned, but again, like you need feedback to grow. And I think that's one thing that's helped me with, can you all hear me? I don't know if I'm disconnecting. Okay. And then I think that's one thing that's helped me, right? Is like, if I get constructive feedback, I know that when I'm getting good feedback, it's because I'm actually doing something really well. And then again, I can figure out what do I need to do to be better. And so asking for that, right? So again, people just unconsciously don't know to give that to you. And so ask for it has been really helpful for me.
That I just want to add really quick, that is so important what you said about asking for it, even in terms of raises or where you see yourself. I had a friend who worked at HR at NBC, and she's like, you have no idea how many men walked through that door demand, like asking for raises, and the women who did just the same amount of work never asked for it, you know, was just waiting. So I feel like I really love that you brought that up.
Yeah, it's really well said. And there's a lot of consultants on this line, Sabine and Lisa, and I've been a lifetime consultant, and I feel like we're gluttons for pain, in that we really love real-time feedback, and it does help you grow. And I think feedback is a gift. So, but the tail end of that feedback is being able to be a recipient of the feedback and being coachable. And I also want to call out ISGH is based in Houston. Anissa, I know you're not from Texas, but you did say y'all, and we're really proud of you for doing that.
Thank you. I'm glad I can make you proud.
So one thing I was thinking through as well here is so asking for feedback, continuing to grow, having confidence. And I still want to poke at the storyline thing, right? Like my mind goes to, all right, there's this person who was technical their whole life, or for the first 5 years of their career. I'm riffing here and I'm making it up. And now they want to get into the business side, and they want to get into strategy, or they want to get into process improvement, making it up. One way to frame their history is to say, hey, I have done ERP implementations. I am a database administrator. Another way of sort of saying the same thing is I take business requirements and distill them into technical outcomes, right? It's almost that you're saying the same thing, right? But you're framing it differently to set yourself up for where you want to go. And, when you have planned your career movements and curating your story, I'm sure we all sort of look at out of the horizon and say, hey, that's the direction I want to go. And this is sort of how I have to build my story to get there. Could anyone sort of chime in on your experiences in doing that and advice you might give to people trying to curate that narrative as well?
I think it's really easy to fall into the trap that you were kind of alluding to of like, oh, but I've only ever done this. So how would that apply here? And I mean, one way some people do this change is people go to business school and they use that to do a career change, but that's definitely not the only way. I think it's really mapping out. We did this exercise in school where we had a partner go through, and you could do this with like a friend or anything. A partner go through, Google you, go through your LinkedIn, go through all of like your assets that you use to pitch yourself. And that friend who is not in your career or industry went through and like circled all the things that were tangible to them, that they understood, that was translatable. And we use that to build storylines for ourselves. In the case of, in my case, like I've been at so many different places. I've interned at Snapchat, I've been at a venture firm, like all these things that don't necessarily tie together. But whenever I did an interview, when they told me to ask, when they do that question, it's like, tell me about yourself. I always said I'm a results-driven storyteller, because it didn't matter what role I was in. Everything I was doing, whether it was on the sales ops side, marketing side, tech side, writing side, I was always telling some sort of story that was tied to some sort of result. And so through that exercise, that's what I sort of coined myself as this results-driven storyteller. And I used that to pitch myself. And then I said, okay, here are the 3 ways that is true. And I used examples that help tie into how I'm this like storyteller that's focused on results. And so I think it's really just taking a macro level of here how my experiences are relatable to other things, right? Like even in business school, we had all these people coming directly from the Army, which you could argue, okay, they don't have tangible business experience, but they would talk about their leadership skills and apply that. And so there's so many different ways you can do that. We had someone at HubSpot who's a sales rep who used to work at a ferret farm, like completely like so random, right? But she talked about managing that ferret farm and how she like took care of the animals and how she had to communicate with other people on her team. And eventually that got her that sales role, right? And so it's really about not bucketing yourself or limiting yourself to the industry that you're in and finding those translatable experiences.
Yeah, I just want to kind of underscore what you said just now. I think it's also really important for like maybe people who are either coming into the workforce for the first time, like coming out of college or high school, or took a break from the workforce and are like going back into it, that your experiences don't have to be like things that you've done in a work setting that have been paid, right? And I think that's one of the most interesting things that I have found, right? So like when I started my job for the first time, I found myself like drawing on skills that I used like as a residential advisor, or that I found like running a club like in college, and that stuff has a lot of value. So don't undersell yourself just because you haven't had like a paying job in a while or haven't had a paying job ever. Like you have a lot of skills, and just taking the time to reflect on that.
And I can add here.
I think oh no, I was about to pick on you, but go ahead, please.
Do you want to ask the question and then I can?
Sure. I was thinking you're on the recruitment side
right.
at the moment, and sort of like, what do you look for in candidates and their narrative, or even like just, I think there's like intangible things you're probably looking at when someone's applying. I'd love to sort of understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Anam really nailed it with, those translatable skill sets. And so a lot of these things, as a recruiter, as a legal recruiter, I will be looking at your technical skills. Obviously, that's on the resume. But then you have these soft skills that is not something that one can necessarily pick up from a resume or even from like a 15 or 20 minute interview, quite frankly. So what I always tell candidates is when you are building your professional narrative is you tailor that narrative towards what it is you're applying to, right? So if you're applying to, especially for anyone here that's watching that is actively in the job market, I always encourage candidates to have different versions of their resume. A lot of times people think, okay, I have my resume. This is the resume I'm going to send out everywhere. But no, you really your resume is your marketing tool. It is there to tell your story. It's not the equivalent of a background check. You don't necessarily need to have every single job on your resume. You want to make sure that your resume tells your story for the purpose of, the position that you're applying for. So if you're an attorney, you would have a legal resume, but if you're applying for, an in-house position at a startup or at a company, you might take off a little bit of the legal experience and add, your entrepreneurship experience. So again, the way that you tell your story is your resume is just one way to do it, or your LinkedIn profile. So don't limit yourself when it comes to that. Definitely try to have multiple versions.
I think one thing to just add to that too, one really great piece of advice I got when it came to references when I was applying to business school, and this can apply for jobs, anytime you need a reference, is be really thoughtful about who those references are. Don't just have it be someone who you think has like the best title or the best reflection. And the way that I was advised to do it is discover what your weaknesses are and then pick references who can speak to those weaknesses. And so when I was applying to business school and I wanted to go to MIT, I was like, well, I don't really have a strong analytical skill set if you look at just like what's on my paper, but I know that's something I've been working on. And so when I talked to one of my bosses who was writing recommendation, he focused solely on the analytical projects that he had me take on, so that if someone looked at my resume and they're like, I don't see anything here that would show me they're analytical, but then they read the reference and that filled that gap. And so think about like, how do you really paint that whole picture of what you're submitting versus oftentimes like when I was looking at applications, you just see like, okay, they're good at this. And then their references said they're good at this. And then their cover letter said they're good at this. Like we don't need to hear the same thing again. Like think of all the assets of your application as like one big story and filling in all the different gaps and storylines that you want your full package to deliver.
Yeah, and I think another point to that is also looking at your your kind of like geographic area, right? Because where I live in the Northern Virginia, DC area, federal and policy related consulting is really important, right? So tailoring my resume to show that federal consulting and that policy kind of experience that I have is really important if I want to stay here, right? But if I go anywhere else, right, Anam, you mentioned you're in that California area, I would tailor my experience to the technical side of what I have, right? So I think it really depends too. Is that if you're mass applying to different places, make sure that you're using resumes that will help you based off of that geographic location, and also help you based off of that niche that you're looking for as well.
Great. I think a lot of this discussion has been about talking yourself up, building your own confidence within yourself, building your storyline. And a few of you poked at the concept of having advocates and mentors. Sabine, you gave an example of being at a sort of table in a meeting, and you felt confident because there was another woman there who lifted you up. We're now in a distributed world. It's much different than it was in person, where handshakes were relevant and grabbing a cup of coffee was as easy as a phone call away. What advice would you give to folks that are seeking out mentors and advocates in this new normal, and maybe even tee it up with like, what's the importance of having a mentor, and maybe what's been the significance of one in your life and in your career development?
I can speak to that a little bit. I just had a few in this quarantine COVID world. I think it's like so different networking, but it's also still really important. And just getting, a little bit more visibility in front of people that in the field that you want to join. So I've had a lot of writers or aspiring writers or people like in between jobs kind of reach out to me. It could even be like, I feel like it depends on your field, but for me, Instagram is appropriate. So I've had people reach out and just, say what situation they're in, say what spoke to them about, my content or about my career. So I know that they're like actually paying attention, and see if I would even FaceTime with them or have a Zoom meeting with them. And I've done that for one girl in particular sticks out to me. She is a writer, and she was freelancing, but she got recently, I think she was, they let go of all their freelance staff, and she reached out to me, also fellow South Asian girl. So I feel like, that really spoke to her that I was in the field, and asked if I would just do like a 10-minute Zoom call. And we ended up talking for like 30 minutes and kept in touch with her, and then started assigning her, assignments. And then now she's at Women's Health. So that transition happened really quickly, but I feel like it is worth reaching out to people that you see in that field. I think maybe LinkedIn, even if not Instagram, in the certain field. But also in terms of acquiring mentors, I think that's super important, because I think for personally, like if you're in a non-traditional career path, there's there's a lot of, it's not very linear, and there's so many doors you can go towards. But the more that, even so my mentor is like the CEO of like a beauty company, and I don't plan to be a CEO of a beauty company, but she's like a Harvard grad and very business minded, so she helps me with a lot of other decisions when I'm at crossroads. So it doesn't necessarily, I feel like, have to be in your field, but someone who makes up for where you think you sort of lack in your mindset. I feel like I'm very creative, maybe not as business savvy. So she helps me with a lot of business decisions.
Great. And it also sounds like in you becoming a mentor, it's almost like you seek out a coach, but you also provide coaching as well. And in this distributed world, they sent you a cold message on Instagram, but related it to, or made a connection with you outside of just an ask on the first message. It was sort of like an admiration for what you do, and then an ask to do a Zoom or a video chat.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I was just closing that thought. Is just I do appreciate when they do show some sort of understanding of what they're looking for, and also like your work. It doesn't always have to be like, oh, I followed this and this just to say that they saw it on Instagram or social, but it's just, it does help that they're paying attention, because, it sticks out to the person you're speaking to.
Aisha?
Yeah, so I was just going to speak a little bit about, just the significance of mentorship, especially in the COVID world right now, where we are so socially distanced. There have been numerous studies right now on the mental health impact that, social distancing is having on professionals and, especially, I believe, our generation as well. So I would just really start by even saying, friendships, making sure that the mentor is just, it could be a friend. I think sometimes we put a lot of weight on maybe the credentials or the background of what a mentor can be. And one of my friends gave me this great advice where she's like, look at your friend circle and try to make sure it's diverse, and make sure you have people that have different backgrounds and different thoughts and different beliefs. And I really love that advice, because I think a lot of times, especially in our community, we tend to just stick with like-minded people. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. But I think that when you are looking at mentors, try to, challenge yourself, look a little bit outside your comfort zone. Here with Amped, which is the networking group in Dallas that we work with, we encourage our membership to seek out mentors and to set up maybe Zoom sessions and ask questions and be prepared. And then the final advice I would give is that, when you are reaching out to someone to set up an informational interview, just try to make it as easy as possible for them. Send them the link, give them a time, be like, this is where I'm going to be. This is where you can find me. That's just, just a small, simple thing that you can do to help facilitate the process.
Yeah, I love that. And this may be semantics around syntax, but just to sort of net out what is a mentor. And I feel like a lot of times, when you think of mentor, it's like this kumbaya-ish, hey, everything is great, you're wonderful, and there's someone just patting you on the back. And I would say, like, when you seek out mentorship or you provide it, almost treat it like coaching. And you really want to be someone and find someone that can roll up their sleeves and get a bit dirty with you and say, hey, Uzair, you were in that meeting, I heard it, and these are the things you need to improve on, and these are the things you did well, type of thing. Because if you don't receive actual constructive criticism, I think the mentorship is sort of like a vampire with drilled down fangs, type of thing.
One thing I'd like to add, and unfortunately be my last piece because I have a family situation I have to deal with, but the one thing I want to leave on is that I get a lot of messages from young women being like, I love your experience. Like, I would love to be where you are one day. And so I'd love to hear, have a mentor who's a woman. And it's great to have female mentors. I've had great female mentors, but don't limit yourself based on that. Don't just be like, I see just the people that you see yourself in. Some of my best mentors early in my career were like my white male bosses who were like the CMOs and the people I was aspiring to be. And like, I still have them, they still me. And the feedback they gave me, because it was so not emotional, they were just like, I want you to go fail 15 times. I was like, okay. Or I'd come back and they'd be like, oh, why didn't you ask for a raise in this amount? And I was like, whoa, okay, I guess I'll go do that. And it was just very clear cut. And oftentimes I got to help them too. I remember one of my bosses was the CMO at our company, and he was we went to a women's session where Sheryl Sandberg was talking about imposter syndrome, and he looked to me, he's like, yeah, but it's not like you have that. And I was like, yes, I do. And then he was like, what? And then we had to talk about that, and that really helped him with the other women that he coached. And so it became this two-way relationship where not only was I helping him be a better mentor to women, but he was helping me just with anything that I needed, and his experiences were really helpful. And so when you're looking at mentors, don't just limit yourself and be like, I'm a Muslim woman, I want a great Muslim woman mentor. You can have one of those, but also seek out people who have such different experiences that they're really going to help you thrive in any sort of scenario. And I feel very lucky that I went after those types of mentors, because they've been really helpful to me then and continue to be helpful for me now. So that's my unfortunately last word, but thank you so much for having me, and feel free to follow up on anyone has questions. I'm just at Anam on Twitter. It's super easy to find, and always happy to be helpful where I can, but seek out lots of diverse help.
Yeah, that is really well said, and when I think about diversity, I even think about it from a team perspective, right? The most successful teams I've been on were folks that were nothing like me, and they sort of supplemented my skill set, and we were unstoppable, I think. And I seek that out as I'm hiring now as well, as folks that are a bit different than me, or they're filling gaps and competencies of my own. Kazal, I'm sorry, you were saying?
No, I was just gonna say, so I've been on both sides of the table. I've had mentees, I have mentors, and at different stages of my career or life, is different types of mentorship that I've sought. One thing I would really like to just say is that, it's great to reach out and find those mentor connections, but be very purpose-driven and be very thoughtful in what you are actually looking for. Think it through, really do the research well, and figure out what are some of those 2 or 3 action items that you would like to actually get to through this mentor connection. Because I do feel that at times people reach out and they see, okay, well, this person's in this great position, or this is where I really want to end up, but they don't have anything concrete to ask, or they don't have any concrete purpose behind that connection. And my advice would be to really think it through.
Yeah, it's really well said. I think what I heard from Aisha as well is not just expectation around the outcome, but it's also expectation around the meeting cadence and the structure around the meeting itself. So focus on being really direct and sort of the communication mechanism when you meet and what you're looking to get out of it. Have you noticed any differences in either seeking out mentorship or folks reaching out to you for mentorship? You know, now we're in a year into this pandemic, like prior to life before the pandemic and now, and what can people learn from that?
I think I would talk about something not to do, because I get this a lot as well. I get people just straight asking for jobs without me having any familiarity with them. And I do get it a lot from people who are just, trying to, they have like a story about whatever, like, oh, it's been so long, I haven't, and I feel bad, but I don't know you. I can't advocate for you if I have no relationship with you. So I think just the way you approach someone and even like build that relationship. For example, the girl that I ended up assigning stories to, I think she did it in such a like nice and respectful way, and it was like led to like a very natural kind of relationship that led to her getting some more work. So I think that just be very, the way you sort of approach someone it is kind of like your first impression, right, in this kind of day and age. So I think that is very it is important.
Well, outside of advocates, mentors, what I think about is networking in the virtual world. And it's become sort of cumbersome to do so because I know we all hit Zoom fatigue by the end of a workday where your camera's been on and you've been staring at this screen in the same chair. But it is really important to keep up and have a pulse on the landscape outside of your own office and build sort of knowledge through discussion. So how do you go about networking in this distributed world? Has it been easy? What are the challenges and recommendations you might offer to the audience?
We can speak to what our company is doing, but you nailed it with the Zoom fatigue. Unfortunately, I just feel like that's really where the networking has been happening for me, at least in the past several months. Our consulting team and our recruitment team kind of indicated that we need to network internally, even as a company, so that we can kind of build on those relationships and do some team building. And so a lot of that has been taking place in the virtual space. We've been hiring, companies that are putting together like scavenger hunts and, virtual, of course, and things like that to really just break the ice. But again, just I think the lack of in-person networking events has certainly hindered people's opportunity to network. But I think that those of us and the people that are more tech savvy and have the bandwidth and the ability and the privilege to come online and to do these types of events, I think we're certainly going to be the ones benefiting more than people that don't necessarily come out much in the virtual space.
It's really well said. And, Sabine and Anissa, I might pick on you here because a big part of consulting is, I feel like, networking internally within your company, especially if you're seeking out a partner path. And it's also with the client. And it used to be really easy with the client because you're like, hey, I have a purse, attached to this program. Let's go get dinner, right? And the client is never going to say no to a free steak. So I guess, now we're in a distributed world. We're trying to network with the client. We're trying to internally network. What is Booz Allen doing? What is Accenture doing? How are you guys managing?
Yeah, actually, I actually wanted to hear what advice Aisha had, because one of my career goals for this year is actually to find more networking avenues. And so I think one of the things that I did learn just in the last year, right, of being in COVID was I found myself often not being present, even in Zoom calls or Zoom meetings. And so I started to make an effort where if I was on a one-on-one discussion with somebody, I would ask them to use the phone instead, right? Because I understand FaceTime is important, but I would ask them to use a phone so I could walk away from my computer. I could walk away from the bings and the tings and the like the business. Like I just like put that just aside for a second and just be present with the person on the phone. Just yesterday, actually, I yelled at my mentor because he was talking to me, but every time I would speak, I could like hear him like clicking, and all of a sudden I was like, stop! Like if you're on the phone with me, you need to stop and pay attention to me. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. And then we both like walked away from our computers and we just talked through it. And I think that's one of the other things is that it's really hard to be present. And my sister always tells me, she always says, like, you need to be present. You need to be present. And so I think even in Zoom calls and all of that, it's added on to that fatigue of being present. And even with Instagram scrolling, right? Once you start scrolling, you just can't stop. And so I think it's important to kind of pause on the technology and just pick up a regular phone and talk to people, right? Or a regular FaceTime and talk to people. I think that's really important.
Yeah, it's really interesting. When I was at CBS, there was this whole training the organization was promoting, and it was titled "Be Here Now." And the premise or the impetus behind setting up the Be Here Now training was don't multitask. And if you're in a meeting, if you're working on something, like be fully present. And I think that transcends networking. It goes into everything we do. There used to, I remember back when everyone was like, hey, how can I become a better multitasker? But my answer is really simple, like you can't, so don't. And focus on one thing at a time and be really good at it while you're doing it. Because people notice as well, right? Like whoever you're talking to is going to immediately say, hey, Sabine's, she's not here and she doesn't care. Even if you're, adding value, the perception is reality is going to be, oh, this person doesn't care. Before I go down that rabbit hole and continue on that tangent, I'll pause and Anissa, I'd love your feedback from a networking perspective as well.
Yeah, so I have things. So I have 3 things to say about kind of networking in COVID this past year. So one, echoing Zoom fatigue. I don't want to talk to anybody after I've been talking on the phone all day, looking at my screen. And I would say, like, don't underestimate the power of an email. If there's somebody you haven't spoken to recently, like, email them right now and just be like, hey, how are you doing? There's an easy conversation starter where you say, how's COVID been? Like, it's very easy. It's maintaining that connection. You're learning about them. They're learning about you. And it's a lot less pressure than like actually setting up the time. And then hopefully like maybe that turns into kind of that one-on-one conversation. In terms of things that Accenture is doing, one of the things that I like the most that Accenture is doing is we're actually cutting down a lot on all of the networking, on all of the like extra activities. And so something that each kind of area of like North America, each region in North America has been doing is something called Connect Days, where it's like what we were getting the feedback is like, okay, with COVID, everybody's scheduling all of these meetings and I want to participate in them. I want to learn, but I also have client meetings and I'm too tired to join. And there's something on my calendar every day. And so now we've slimmed it down into like one day, I think like every couple of months, where you kind of like dedicate that day to talking to people and to learning about different things. And I think that's like kind of increased engagement a ton. That's when we have a lot of one-on-one coffee chats with partners. And I think it's just easier to kind of focus on that. And then I think the third thing that I found in the virtual world has been letting people be a lot sillier at work. And I'm a big fan of that. So it's like, instead of like starting the all hands and like going straight into like the business of the day, you start playing all of these fun games and looking at all these virtual tools, because people, Accenture, one of Accenture's big thing is truly human. And I think it's true. It's like people just need a space to be human. like we're not made to be isolated this much. We're not made to be working all the time. And so kind of feel free to be human with the people you're talking to, right? Like talk about their dogs or the weather or like what you bought on Amazon this weekend. And really make that a part of your meeting, because I think that will like kind of make everything more productive and more beneficial in the long run, is giving yourself that space.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And Lisa, I can sort of echo, my team meeting that I host on Fridays has 100% become, first 15 minutes of it is open, no structure. We're just talking. I also host daily stand-ups with my team, and those stand-ups, if it's on a Monday, always start out now with how was the weekend? What did you do? And how are you, right? And to humanize this whole thing is so important in bringing empathy into it, because we are all drained. Well, one thing I'll add is, I don't necessarily go to networking events, but selfishly, like I like to network with people because I want to like learn what they're doing. And I think I become more intelligent by having conversations with really intelligent people. It's not necessarily that I'm looking for a job, because I'm not at the moment, but I think that sort of information exchange is so important. So I do things like volunteer my time at the Innovation Lab at Harvard or Brown, or Salia was on the last panel, and she runs an incubator at the University of Houston. So I've been volunteering time there as well. And you end up meeting really intelligent people that way. And it sort of like ends up becoming a networking thing, in addition to the input and value you're adding to a startup or to a person. I just wanted to add that flavor of networking in, that it doesn't necessarily have to be sort of networking can be a byproduct of something else, is my point. So we've spoken about networking, and I'm going to do a really bad transition into how to get into certain career paths. We spoke about entrepreneurship and Ghazal, and the value you've added is intense there. Anissa and Sabine, as long as you still have the mic, I'd love to sort of talk about how can somebody get into this career of consulting? What were your tactics used, your thought process, and what advice might you hand over to someone that's really interested in joining a consulting firm?
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. So I don't really have a very interesting story of how I got into consulting. So as I mentioned, I live in the Washington, D.C. area. That is consulting is a really big kind of career choice here. But I was thinking back a couple months ago in my sixth grade yearbook, I had written the things that I wanted to do when I grew up. And the first thing it said was a pediatrician. And it did not become a pediatrician, surprise. But at a certain point, I think we, as I mentioned before, is I think the people around you often shape where you're going. And so for me, my dad is in the IT world. My sister is in the business and finance world. And so it was a very natural thing for me to kind of gravitate towards that business and IT aspect. But I think I had that inside of me. I always wanted to do something in healthcare, and that's how I got into healthcare consulting. But it wasn't easy. I finished my master's right at the time where the economy was really, really bad. And so I applied for a lot of jobs, and I did not get callbacks. And so for a year, I applied for jobs, and I couldn't find anything. And one of the things that I honestly really, really made a lot of dua, and I kept the faith. And I think that goes, I know like from a business standpoint, a lot of people just say like, keep trying, market yourself differently. And I think all of that is very true. But I think at the end of the day, you do have to remember like your qadr, your naseeb all comes from one place. And you do have to keep coming back to, okay, how can I improve my connection with God? How can I improve my connection with Allah, that I can kind of get to what I'm looking for, right? And I think that helped me tremendously, is because the year that I And the year that I finished my master's was the year that I was looking for a job, and ended up the year that I actually started wearing hijab, because I felt like that it was like a transition time for me. And so I applied a lot to, and I wanted to work at Booz Allen. Like, that was one of my things, is that I really wanted to work there. I wanted to like find a way in. And I, through like a random situation where I actually got 2 interviews with 2 different aspects of Booz Allen, on the defense side and on the health side. And neither knew that they interviewed me, but both offered me a job at like months later. So it took a lot of time, a lot of trying, a lot of patience to get there. But I think at the end of the day, it is you have to make dua. You have to keep trying. Don't stop. Keep trying. And as the wonderful ladies on this panel said, market yourself differently, right? If you're feeling like you're kind of cookie cuttering yourself along the path, then it's not going to really come out in your favor, right? You do have to, you're the only one who can advocate for yourself. So you have to kind of go out and do that. But at the end of the day, I think it's like a combination of all of those things that can help you get there. But I turn the floor to Anissa. She had a different experience.
Yeah, so I joined Accenture out of college. So I did the campus recruitment process. I think from that experience, I think one important thing is if you're interested in consulting, the first thing to do is your research. So consulting is such a vague term. Honestly, a lot of people inside consulting don't know how to describe it. So find out what the companies you're interested in are doing, or find out what the companies are doing, and then decide what you're interested in, right? So some firms have more of a tech focus, some are more strategy or management, some like specialize in certain areas, but you should definitely know that before going into kind of the application process. The second thing that I would want to say about kind of getting into consulting is really back to the networking thing. Find out who in your network either is a consultant or knows someone who is a consultant, and don't be afraid to ask for that introduction. I think a lot of people think that they want to get jobs on their own merit, and asking somebody to introduce them to someone is not their merit. And it is. Nobody's going to give you a job just for being it, but you can ask for that introduction. And it doesn't take away from your value as a person, or like your value in getting that job, rather. And then I think the one other thing about consulting is you may have heard that the interviews are really different than a lot of interviews in other firms, or other areas. So it really does go back to that whole research and preparing. Find out what consulting case interviews are. There's a ton of resources out there. Find out what the firms you're interested in, how they're interviewing, and then just practice. So just kind of a brief overview. I think for most consulting firms, that might be changing a little bit now, but there's usually like a more traditional interview where you talk about your strengths and weaknesses and experiences. And then there's something called a case interview, where they kind of test to see how you think and how you work. And again, there's a lot of resources out there. It is really frightening the first time you do it. But again, just like practice. I think those are my biggest advices.
Yeah, practice does make better for the cases. And, I'm hiring at the moment, and I do 2 cases. I do a conversational in the first interview that I have, and then I do a written case study as the final interview. And I can tell you it's much more, it's a lot more fun when you're the one giving the case than receiving it. But I actually enjoy receiving cases now too, because it's all about like how you structure your approach to solving a problem. That's really, really good advice, Sabine and Anissa. And I love how tactful you got in really approaching the industry of consulting. I'd love to poke at Aisha and Shema as well. You're both in, sort of these really interesting careers right now. When I think of law as an example, you hear about the industry becoming saturated. A lot of lawyers are no longer going, joining a firm and going sort of the traditional route of what you think a lawyer would do. Some of them are going into consulting, and it's like, how would, for those that are interested in getting into law, Aisha, what advice would you give them? And then Shema, for the same question for your career path as well.
Absolutely. So, I hear that a lot, about the saturation of the industry, which to me is kind of ironic because to me, I look at lawyers as problem solvers. And so I look at the world and I'm like, gosh, there's so many problems in the world. Like, we need more, we need more problem solvers. But the way that the model and the infrastructure and the firm environment, the way that things are set up, yes, it is definitely a competitive environment. So I'll just give a really high level, one-on-one, how to become a lawyer. Nowadays I hear a lot of youth talking about, how grades are not as important to be successful. They see these like YouTube sensations and people have different, ideas in terms of how to go about things in a non-traditional environment. And while that still may be the case for some professions, the legal profession is definitely not one of them. So performing well in high school will increase your chances of getting into a college or university. Similarly, strong grades on your undergrad transcript and your strong performance on the LSAT, which is the law school admission test, is essential. Many pre-law students in undergrad will pursue degrees in political science, as did I. But if you have an engineering or a science background, law schools actually value those degrees as well. So there's not just one specific path. And then during law school, you'll have the opportunity to intern with firms, with courts, nonprofits. And I would advise diversifying your internship experience so you can learn what suits you best. And then the final and most challenging part, I would say, of becoming an attorney is getting your bar license, which is a membership with the respective state bar of the jurisdiction that you want to practice law in. And this is when you intensively prepare for a bar exam and await the results. And for many, it is a rigorous, life-changing experience that really tests one's commitment to the profession and to the level of reasoning required to be a lawyer. So the law itself is a vast body of rules and regulations, from the environment to government, corporate, immigration to family. But overall, I would say there are two major areas of law that attorneys can pursue, which is litigation and transactional law. So litigation attorneys are going to be the ones that you see on your TV shows, Suits, if you guys watch that, or they go to court and they deal directly with the justice system in the pursuit of civil or criminal cases. This is where you would need a strong foundation of like evidence laws and civil procedure, and where you get to say things like "objection, Your Honor" and stuff like that. So that's litigation. And then for those who prefer to stay out of court, transactional lawyers, for the most part, they focus more on business disputes, contracts, organizational governance, and compliance issues. And so some examples of transactional lawyers are those who review employment agreements, draft wills, or create IP licensing policies for corporations. So, if you're planning to pursue a career in law, the earlier I would say that this is the path you want to take, the more time you will have to certainly prepare for it. I knew from an early age, my father, actually, it was his vision. He gave me a middle name, Munsafa, which has the root word Insaf in it. So I didn't have the challenge of not having my family support. I certainly had my family support, but the challenges that I faced was more from society and the acceptance of, a woman's voice being her source of power, and the way that she writes and the way that she speaks. So for those that are looking to go to law school, I did want to give a resource. It's called lsac.org. That's the Law School Admission Council. They have a list of resources that you can look at. But I do think that everyone here on this panel, we're all in these unique professions. And I think that being able to visualize what your future would look like when you don't necessarily see a lot of women in that profession has definitely been a challenge. And really the only way to overcome this is to be steadfast, to be committed to your vision of your future. And as cliche as this sounds, the minute you stop worrying about what people will think, or, in Urdu, they say, "Log kya kahenge," your challenges will transform into opportunities. So, thank you for that question. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Aisha. Incredibly valuable feedback. Shema, I'd love to ask you the same question as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you mentioned Suits. Sorry, my husband's making lattes right now, so sorry about the background noise. But yeah, my husband's obsessed with Suits right now, so he's like rewatching it. I love that you mentioned that. But as far as advice in my certain field, which is very, very niche, as I've mentioned before. It's in the digital media space. And the thing about that now, and media has changed so much since I started, because it was very traditional before. It was very magazine heavy, and like you had to be at a publishing company. Whereas now there's so many avenues to create content. Whereas like Instagram is not just your blog, it's TikTok and all these things. You need to, I feel like starting it's within everyone's reach to just sort of show how you create content. And, you know, there's so many avenues to publish. And once, like, if someone is applying to a job, like in our digital company, media company, we first look at those socials. And that's just kind of like the truth of it is, like, we want to see that you can create content, if you can write. And I feel like there's so many avenues to self-publish for that. So I would definitely take advantage of those resources and make sure that, you know, you put yourself out there as much as you can and get that visibility. Can you hear me? I feel like there's a little bit of an echo. Okay. And yeah, definitely like reaching out to editors like myself on social. I think I mentioned on certain fields it might not be appropriate, but for my field it's totally fine because we all work on those platforms is great. And it's a good way to start the conversation. And then usually if someone wants to reach out to me on a business level, then I will just, you know, if it's Instagram or whatever, I'll just send them my email and then we'll continue the conversation there. So I thought at the beginning of when I started this career, I realized how important it was to see people like myself in that career path, even though it wasn't the norm. And I feel like if you are considering something like that, just know that there is a different point of intersection for people to understand our community as you know, Muslims and women, if you try like different career choices too. So sorry, it's a bit of a spiel.
No, I think it's incredibly valuable advice. And, you know, as we wrap up the day here, I wanted to sort of reel everyone back in for a moment into the sort of like the impetus behind why Inspire and Innovate was set up as a series. You know, it was at the start of the pandemic, and I was just running a program at work to sort of meet the unmet behavioral health needs secondary to a pandemic in Massachusetts. So as I'm designing a business case for the program, I realized, you know, unemployment is such a big issue at the moment, and it's disproportionately affecting the communities that we live in as minorities, as you know, minority groups, really. And I took it as a personal mission to say, like, we have to do something. And I sent a cold email to a lot of organizations, and I literally sent an email to info@isgh.org. And that email response came back to me from the president of ISGH at that time, who was Sohail Saeed. And he said, we have to do this. And the partnership between an organization that has the reach like ISGH to really make a difference to folks that are going through a difficult time amidst a pandemic with their work, with their vocations, with their livelihood, was so refreshing to see. We have had sessions with MIT professors. We've had a healthcare focused program with senior executives from United Healthcare, from Vizient. We've led a Women's Leaders Month, right? Think about that. 4 sessions with incredible women Muslim leaders reaching out to the community, and not just offering a webinar and a panel, but also offering mentorship after these sessions, where we link each one of these ladies up and each one of the previous panelists up with someone that's seeking out mentorship, and they get one-on-one support. You know, it's sort of humbling to say this, and I get a bit emotional when I'm sort of thinking about it. It's been an incredible ride, and it's been an incredible journey. And I have so many emails that come to me of people saying, like, this has been helpful and thank you. I mean, it's a needed thing in the community, and I'm so glad we were all able to do it. So all that's to say, you know, this is the last session of Inspire and Innovate. I want to thank ISGH for their support and everything we've been doing here. I'd also like to thank all of the panelists, and, you know, Sabine, Aisha, Anissa, Ghazal, Anam, Shema. Thank you so much. I know how expensive time is at the moment, and for you to dedicate the hours you have in planning and attending this event and the hours you'll dedicate to mentorship is so important. You're all inspirations, and I'm humbled to have been on a panel with each of you. So thank you so much. With all of that being said, I'd love for all of us to go around the room and end with a quick parting shot, a piece of advice, a nugget of inspiration that you would leave with the community as we sign off on what seems to be a beautiful Saturday out here, at least.
I'll start. Thank you for having me here today. It was really, really exciting to be here with these wonderful women and just hear your different stories. It was inspiring for myself. I'm excited to have mentorship sessions. I'm excited to learn from other people as well. So thank you for that opportunity. And thank you, Azair, for bringing this together. I think just from a Muslim community standpoint, it's really, really awesome to see people giving back. And in a world where maybe your masjids are still closed and you can't go regularly, it's nice to be able to have this forum to give back and have that venue. So thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Sabine, you owe a piece of advice. We didn't hear it.
Oh, sorry. I guess my piece of advice is keep going, keep trying. We've been in this pandemic for a year now. Don't lower your spirits. If you're looking for a job or if you lost your job, inshallah, there'll be a way. And inshallah, maybe one of us can be of your service. So thank you.
Great.
All right, well, I can go next. I also wanted to echo Sabihin's comments. So thank you so much to the Islamic Society of Greater Houston for inviting us to speak. This panel itself is very innovative for our community, and I think we should recognize that and recognize the organization's leadership. Thank you so much to Azair as well for being such a wonderful moderator. And then my advice will be just, especially to the women that are watching this, is challenge the status quo and just be unapologetic yourself. So that's my advice.
Anissa?
Yeah, so like everybody said, thank you. This has been so much fun. Happy to be here. I've been looking forward to it for a really long time. So, but I think the advice that I would leave everybody with is ask, right? So ask for feedback, ask for introductions, ask for raises. The worst anybody can say is no. And I know that's a cliche, but it's true. And I think like it's most important to like ask and be active in your own career trajectory. So thank you.
Also, just want to thank everyone and for being here. I learned so much from each and every one of you, and really appreciate being asked to be on such a informative panel. My advice would just be use this time. I know, like if you're sending through your resume after resume, it gets exhausting and it's easy to lose hope. But use this time to sort of differentiate your skill set and sort of rethink like the different kinds of jobs that you want, because perhaps your skill set could be applied to different types of jobs and not just one. So really use this time. I know it can feel like time is dragging when you're looking for a job, but time is also very valuable. So trust me, when you start working, you're not going to have that kind of time back. So I really, wish everyone good luck on the job search, and hopefully we can be a resource for you all.
Thank you, Sheena.
I would like to echo everybody's sentiment. It was amazing and exhilarating to be on this panel with such amazing women. And of course, you, Azair, thank you for putting this series together, and ISGH for encouraging this. My one piece of advice would be continue to believe in yourself. And yes, it is cliche that when one door closes, another one opens. But in my life, I have definitely seen that to be true. And I'm a firm believer in that. So don't let that get you down. Continue also to invest in yourself, which means that use the time and the opportunity to be able to take either LinkedIn courses or any other, seek the mentorship, but continue every day to invest in yourself and to be able to curate a better story as a result of it.
Thank you so much, all. And I'll end with, a bit of a quote that I was just reading the other day, and it's, remember, if you ever need a helping hand, it's at the end of your arm. As you get older, remember you have another hand. So the first is to help yourself, and the second is to help others. And I think that's why we're all here, and I hope we sort of continue that. So thank you all so much for joining, and happy Saturday.